Today is Wednesday, April 3rd, and this is your very first edition of Political Update for the month of April 2024. I'm Tim Darnell. Our show is produced, as always, by Maria Moreau, and here are some of the headlines that we're following for you in this week's edition of Political Update, here from our First Alert Desk on Atlanta News First. Last week, as expected, former President Donald Trump and several of his defendants, in the massive RICO trial here in Atlanta are appealing a recent judge's ruling that keeps the very controversial Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis on their case and continuing in her role to prosecute. Speaking of Fulton County DA Fani Willis, she made a controversial address this past weekend to the South Fulton Police Department. Donald Trump's attorneys continue arguing that his allegations of a stolen 2020 presidential election and of alleged election interference constitute free speech and therefore should not be prosecuted as in a criminal trial. Georgia lawmakers adjourned last week for the 2024 session, but not before passing a new law that came about as a result of a series of Atlanta News First special investigations. We'll circle back with that topic in just a moment, but again, the top story last Friday, as expected, Donald Trump and several of his co-defendants have filed an appeal in the Georgia Court of Appeals that is appealing a decision made by Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee that allows Fani Willis to remain as the lead prosecutor in her historic multi-count indictment that was handed down in August 2023, accusing Donald Trump and now 14 remaining Republican allies of engaging in a criminal-like conspiracy to overturn Georgia's 2020 presidential election. Now, this appeal comes 10 days after another ruling by McAfee that did give Donald Trump and his co-defendants permission or a green light to file an appeal of his ruling that allowed Fulton County DA Fani Willis to remain on the case as long as her special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, recused himself from the case, which did happen. Now, in early January, the entire nation was rocked by a series of allegations by one of Donald Trump's co-defendants and his attorney, Michael Roman, and attorney Ashley Merchant, who, in a court filing, alleged that Fani Willis and Nathan Wade were not only engaged in an improper romantic relationship, but also an improper financial arrangement as well. That was enough. Those allegations were enough, and after multiple days of court testimony, were enough to persuade Scott McAfee, the Fulton County Superior Court judge, who is overseeing one of the most complex legal and political trials in the nation, to request that Nathan Wade recuse himself if Fani Willis were to continue prosecuting. But he also did give permission to the defendants to appeal that decision. That is exactly what happened last Friday. So the next stop in the Donald Trump saga, the saga of Donald Trump here in Georgia and the Fani Willis affair, will now go before the Georgia Court of Appeals. Depending on that ruling, who knows, by later this year we could see this entire case being argued before the Georgia Supreme Court. Donald Trump will also be in Atlanta next week, April 10th, but the list of guests on Donald Trump's Atlanta fundraiser and who is hosting the fundraiser is really a story and a reflection of how divided Georgia's Republican Party is when it comes to the former president.
This Trump fundraiser will be next Wednesday somewhere in Atlanta. We haven't been told where yet. Among the list of hosts, former senators from Georgia Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, also Home Depot co-founders Billy and Bernie Marcus. But political strategist Brian Robinson says what is more interesting is who isn't on that list.
Anybody who is in the current Georgia establishment isn't on there. No one who is in elected office leadership is mentioned as an honorary guest, and that shows you some of the rift that still remains from the 2022 election cycle, where President Trump came in and endorsed against Governor Kemp and other incumbent Republicans.
And Donald Trump's visit here will come just days after he asked a state appellate court to remove Fani Willis from his election indictment case here in Fulton County. In Midtown, Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.
Now it's our wonderful political reporter Doug Reardon reporting yesterday on the fact that Donald Trump is hosting a fundraiser here in Atlanta on April 10th next week. It is being hosted among the co-hosts by two former Georgia United States senators, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. Both of them were, this is kind of ironic, both of them were defeated by Democrats, John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock, meaning that Georgia now has a dual Democratic representation in the United States Senate for the first time in several decades. It's been a number of years since two Democrats held both of Georgia's U.S. Senate seats. Also hosting the co-hosting the fundraiser is the legendary Bernie Marcus, co-founder of the Home Depot with Arthur Blank and several others, and also the founder of what has become arguably one of the Southeast's major tourist attractions, that being the Georgia Aquarium. Speaking of Fani Willis, she is back in the headlines as she continues to hope to bring former President Donald Trump to trial before this year's election. She appeared before the South Fulton Police Department over the weekend, and the city of South Fulton has not been without its share of controversies and upheavals since its short founding of only a few years ago. Here is what DA Fani Willis told South Fulton police officers.
Over the last 3 years now, I love this police department like no other, and I have put extra strain on this police department because you've had to take extra steps to make sure we are safe.
Now, DA Fani Willis has been admonished by Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee to refrain from some of her more controversial comments regarding the case. So far, none of Donald Trump's attorneys, co-defendants, or attorneys for his co-defendants have made a request for any sort of gag order, so to speak, to really coerce the DA from making controversial public comments regarding her prosecution of the nation's 45th president, even though Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee did say in his ruling last month that perhaps the time has come for such a request. But no, none of the attorneys representing the former president or any of his allies have made any such request. We'll see if that changes if the DA continues to appear in public and make controversial comments regarding the case. Also here in Atlanta last Thursday, Georgia lawmakers adjourned for the 2024 session, a day of celebration really that has become known as Sine Die, which is Latin phrase that has been adopted by American political lexicon. We had team coverage throughout the day on Thursday as the General Assembly hurtled toward its final hours, including this report from our own Abby Kasuris.
The Capitol quiet and eerie compared to the crowded hallways filled with lobbyists and lawmakers trying to pass bills before the deadline. A bill banning puberty blockers surged, then died. but not before passing in the Senate. Democrats like State Senator Kim Jackson say Republicans are using vulnerable transgender kids as a target.
Damage has already been done. Children are watching this type of action being taken place. They're hearing adults, lawmakers speak against their very existence. And so that is creating problems and damage already.
The bill never made it for a vote here in the House.
Some folks choose politics. The House chooses results.
But plenty of others did pass, including a package of election bills stuffed into another bill, passing in both chambers just before midnight. The bill limits voter eligibility and makes it easier for someone to file a mass voter challenge. The ACLU is preparing a lawsuit, saying the bill violates the National Voter Registration Act.
It's really unfortunate that this bill perpetuates the idea that there is something wrong with the counting of votes in Georgia. They voted to make it more difficult for Georgia citizens, people who are eligible to register, people who are on the rolls, make it harder for them to vote.
This year's budget includes historic investments in mental health services across the state and raises for pre-K and teachers.
So that it's more affordable and accessible and higher quality for all of our youngest students.
This year is the second year in the biennial session, meaning that bills that didn't pass are effectively done. The bill sponsors could present those bills again next year, but they'll have to start back at the beginning of the process. In Atlanta, I'm Abby Kasouris.
That was Abby Kasouris from the state capitol, and one of the bills that lawmakers did pass in the final hours of this year's 2024 legislative session came after a series of special investigative reports from our team here at Atlanta News First Investigates. And one of our award-winning investigative reporters, Sierra Cummings, did a multi-part series on how easy it is for your home to be stolen really right from under you without your knowledge.
Had you heard of something like this happening before?
No, ma'am, I hadn't heard it. I didn't think that would happen to me.
Although in his retirement phase of life, 85-year-old Robert Elder feels like he just took on a new job, trying to correct a misdeed. For more than 50 years,
Since the early 70s.
Robert built equity into his Southwest Atlanta property. In that time, he lost his sight,
Been blind like I am.
his late wife.
I don't have a circle people.
Now, he's even lost the home.
The deed to transfer title has your signature on it.
Somehow or another it worked, but I don't know who put it on there.
Last year, a new deed was filed on Robert's house, not just once, but 3 different times. First in July, then again in August with updated wording labeled corrective deed, and once more in September. All transferred Robert's home to someone else. None of the signatures matched the way the 85-year-old signed his name as shown in other official documents. As Atlanta News First Investigations revealed, under current Georgia law, to file property paperwork in the clerk's office, no identification is required. No one has to prove they own the property. In effect, anyone can file deeds on your home. In Robert's case, it was not a stranger who did this. A Fulton County lawsuit accuses his own family, a stepson from his first marriage, Tory Elder.
I feel more disappointed.
Property fraud attorney Rick Allenbeck.
Mr. Elder did not sign these documents. Absolutely none. I mean, this is stealing. This is theft. And just because, a gun wasn't used or because nobody broke into somebody's house doesn't mean it's not a crime that shouldn't be prosecuted.
We found 2 addresses linked to the son accused, Tory. He was not there. We later talked to him on the phone. How did your dad's name get on this deed transfer when he says he never signed it?
He's lying.
Why would he be lying?
You need to talk to him about that.
So how did his name get on this deed? How did his name get on this deed?
Weird.
The lawsuit blames the notaries, too. As long as a deed is filled out and notarized, the clerks must accept it. However, state law says notaries should stamp documents only when they witness and confirm the true identity of the signer. If Robert never signed the deeds, never met any of the notaries, Why were the deeds notarized in the first place? A question we attempted to ask the notaries whose names were on these deeds, Jamila Garth and Christine Smith.
The notaries seem very elusive.
We went to properties that public records show were possibly connected to the women. We sent messages to their email addresses tied to their notary certifications. One later answered our phone call, Christine Smith.
We just want to know why you notarized the document if Mr. Robert Elder never signed it.
She refused to explain.
There's no question. Yeah, somebody notarized a document that was signed by someone who was not Mr. Elder.
As for the alleged deed theft, Robert has this to say to the man he considered a son.
Well, I think he ought to get a life and take care of his business.
So you want him to get a life, get his own life?
Well, I think he got one, but he just, he doesn't want to take a shortcut in life. I think that's what he is. Don't take no shortcut.
Sierra Cummings, Atlanta News First.
That was our award-winning special investigative reporter, Sierra Cummings. She is part of the largest team of investigative journalists in the Southeast. Just another example of the series of impactful stories that we do here at Atlanta News First, and Atlanta News First Investigates. And we hope that you'll continue joining us every Wednesday at 1:30 on YouTube and all of our streaming platforms as we continue to follow the headlines that is currently making Georgia the center of the nation's political universe. I'm Tim Darnell for Maria Moreau and all of our team of reporters and producers here from the First Alert Desk. Thank you for watching.